Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Taos, Baltimore. We are Baltimore positive, positively getting you ready for springtime. We're doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour in various places. Down the stretch they come. It is Preak this week around here. We'll be on Wednesday at Fadley's at Lexington Market doing the Crab Derby. I will have the Maryland Lottery scratch-offs, including the Assateague courses and the Ocean City Carousel and all sorts of things we'll be doing. Also on the 21st, we'll be at the Fishmonger's Daughter. That will be in Catonsville as we open and christen a new place right down the street from Beaumont and State Fair and El Guapo and all the fun that we have around here. Anytime Bonnie Bernstein wants to come on this program, she's welcome to do so. But she's usually promoting something in the media and, hey, I have a new show kind of space. She's doing a thing at ABC. Bonnie and I have been knowing each other a long time. You get all these Maryland roots, even though you're all New Yorked up and all of that. But you're always doing stuff that is more along the lines of what I've been doing lately, which is sitting down and talking to people as we get a little older, although you and I are not that old. We get to talk to cool people, and I'm excited for your new project, and I want you to tell me all about it. How's life, Bon?
Old is a state of mind, Ness. We don't age is they say age is just a number. So I have to say I kind of agree with that. Well, thank you for having me on, and hello to all of our Maryland fans and our Terps in particular, class of 92 journalism, and still very involved with the journalism program there and the gymnastics program. Funny enough, my gymnastics coach's son, who I've known since he was 7 years old, has been our longtime head gymnastics coach at Maryland. So that's pretty cool. The project that I'm working on is called The Champion's Edge on ABC. It premieres Saturday on every single ABC station in the country, although the time we always say check your local listings. And what The Champion's Edge is a showcase of extraordinary women across all different industries whose common link is that they played sports growing up. And they talk about how the life skills we learn through sports, the leadership, the teamwork, the resilience, the time management, the confidence, the discipline, all of the things, the role that cumulatively has played in their career success. And Ness, I think in our world, we're accustomed to seeing people who play sports wind up in the sports profession as a coach or a professional player, or maybe they're on an administrative track at a university or what have you. What we're doing here is research based, and there's extraordinary opportunity for stories that we're telling that most people aren't seeing. So, the data point we love to talk about is that 94% of all female C suite executives played sports. And what we wanted to do is tell the stories that bring the data to life, this connection between sports participation and career success, particularly for women. So, yes, we're going to shine a light on women who are coaches and athletic directors and commissioners, but we're also profiling doctors and lawyers and women in finance and women who are CEOs, CMOs, COOs, entrepreneurs, women in entertainment and music. And so the net of it is our goal is to become the ultimate, if you see it, you can be it database of stories for girls playing sports so they realize that what we're learning while we're playing will benefit us the rest of our lives.
94%.
Yeah.
So I don't, I know you well, but I don't know you that well. And I know you from the gymnastics space. Did you kick a soccer ball? Did you play softball, little league? I think of you as an athlete. I think of you as the Maryland thing and the CBS and like all the things you did. But I, to meet a female executive in a suit, and I do this all the time. I'm at networking events all the time, and a lot of the rooms can be 60, 70% female, depending on what room I walk into. I never think were they tapping ballet, which my mom tried to push me into when I was 6 years old. I remember going to that one because she watched Lawrence Welk, and she's thinking tap or ballet, and I'm like, no, I'm basketball, I'm baseball, I want to do the sports thing. But then there's the point where like the modern kid is just a soccer kid or just a lacrosse kid or just like they get put into this whole churn of leagues and things that were outside of my rec league. But did you play sports as a kid, or were you gymnastics from the time you were 4 years old on a mat?
So I actually started out with tumbling, then I started playing soccer. I did gymnastics was always my primary sport. That was probably my athletic through line. Played a little bit of softball. In high school, I actually ran 110 and 400 hurdles, and I threw javelin and shot put, and I actually made it to the States for javelin. my freshman year, and that was one of my favorite field events. So I really was a multi-sport athlete. But when it came time to coming to around to college, I knew that gymnastics was going to be my sport. But what you're talking about, Ness, is a really important conversation that I think we need to be having in our parent communities, because we're seeing more and more how kids might start out playing a bunch of different sports, but then they start specializing at a very early age. And what happens so many times with kids is there's this pressure when you're focusing on only playing one sport, and what gets lost? The fun. I can't tell you how many athletes I've come across, especially the ones who are getting full rides in college, aspiring to play in a professional league, whether that's men's or women's. And we talk about how the fun is gone. It's a job. And at the end of the day, I think it's critically important to have this conversation with kids and their parents that at the end of the day, if you get nothing else out of sports, you wanted it to be fun. You wanted to be playing with your friends, your teammates. It created community. And you do learn the leadership and the teamwork and all the different things. But if sports doesn't become fun, there's something wrong.
Well, was it always fun for you?
No, no. I mean, but I'm probably a little bit different because I
It
was,
got to that point maybe at Maryland, or was it fun when you were 11 or 12, or was it always super competitive when you were 14 in order to get to that level to go to Maryland and do it?
I think there comes a time when you become really serious about your sport, that the serious nature and that laser focus takes over. And that's where the opportunity is, because my parents were incredibly supportive, but we weren't having the conversation, are you having fun? I don't I don't know that that ever came up. And by the time I was done with gymnastics, I had gone through an ACL reconstruction and two scopes in 4 years at Maryland. And the intestinal fortitude in me drove me to come back, just to be able to say I overcame what I remember. The orthopedic my freshman year, when I blew out my knee, and he said, I think your career might be over. And I was like, no, it's not. That I want to be able to walk away on my terms. And so that sort of that's something inside me that made me want to come back to a certain degree to prove people wrong. What I didn't realize at the time is that the fun was really lost. And while I loved it, you can differentiate. Do you love a sport? Yes. Are you always having fun? No. And I guess that can be a broader conversation about how we feel about our work, right? But when I was done, I was ready to be done. And I think in hindsight, I wished that I did focus more on the fun aspect than ultimately I did.
Well, then we went into the business of doing this. You went to J School at Maryland. Bonnie Bernstein is here, Emmy Award-winning sportscaster, creator, host, and executive producer. So we're going to get to that because she's now running the whole thing. The Champion's Edge premieres this week on ABC, and discussing leadership with women who are already leaders in the C space about their sports experience. So when you chat with these folks, I guess my point was I see you as a C-level woman and as an athlete, but not as somebody that may have kicked a soccer ball, that you did what you did and you had to have been really good at what you do to have been in gymnastics at that point at D1 and the real ACC back when we hated Duke and North Carolina the
Yeah,
way it
yeah.
should have been. But when you meet these other women, is this about playing little league softball, or is this about, hey, I was a D1 something something in some way, or is it the whole spectrum of just having been a girl exposed to sports, which was still rare in your era? Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you're sort of kind of my wife's age, and I'm thinking like my age, and I'm thinking girls today have such an open door with
Yeah.
the WNBA, with how far soccer has come. Where
The
I live, the
professional
lacrosse
lacrosse,
stick,
hockey, absolutely.
just all the way around. That if I had a 6-year-old granddaughter right now, her sports experience would look a whole lot different than the girls I grew up with on my street back in the 70s.
It is a great question, and I'm so glad you asked it, because one of the messages that we want to get across is that you don't have to be an elite athlete to experience all the benefits of sports. Now, most of the women in our database did play college sports, but I'll give you a perfect example. Our first episode out the gate is with Ginger Z, the first female chief meteorologist in the history of network television. So Ginger, we see her every day when we get up and watch Good Morning America, and she gives us our forecast. But she's never talked at length about what we talked about in our interview. She's here and there, she's talked about being a multi sport athlete, but we got into it. I mean, she played every sport under the sun, and but she only competed through high school. And yet she had such clarity about the lessons she learned through sports. And she was done by the time she went to college. So it's such a great example. And I don't want to share too much about the episode because it's really riveting. And part of her story entails running for her mental health, which is critically important because it's Mental Health Awareness Month. So we sort of strategically decided to launch with Ginger's episode. But here's a woman who is one of the top meteorologists in her field. She is a scientist who is at the top of her game. And in so many different ways, her sports experience has enabled her to get to the top of that mountain.
I want to read the list of these guests here because, I mean, some of them have been on my show. Dominique Dawes, obviously in the same space as you. Jessica Mendoza, Kit Hoover, just a wide variety. But in talking to this first, let's say, 15 guests that you've had on, is there anything that's a commonality that you've seen run across all of this in sports that you even share that becomes something that we're going to talk about that with every one of these people because it, other than just being female and being successful and in the business world to some degree, there's got to be something else in common that brought all these women to sport and then to business.
I think two of the common themes that we hit on almost every episode are resilience and the ability to pivot. Because chances are, if you are getting to the top of your field, you've hit a lot of roadblocks along the way. And how we process what is characterized as failure is critically important to getting to the top of your profession. Because I think societally, we are conditioned to think if you fail, there's something wrong. We take it personally. It's an indictment on our ability, our personality, whatever it is. And what sports teaches us is that failure is a critical element in the road to success. A lot of times we can't dictate whether we succeed or fail, but we can control is how we deal with that failure. What do we learn from that? How do we get better? How do we get smarter? How do we potentially pivot when it comes to achieving our goals? And we are naturally taught that in sports that failure is part of the key to success. And I think that is something that comes through in some way, shape, or form in every interview.
Bonnie Bernstein is here. She has a new show on ABC. It debuts this week. Can people find this on the web, or is this something we got to tune in on the weekends? Give me how we find it if we don't find it right away.
Well, for right now, it is going to be on ABC on Saturday mornings. We know lots of families are busy on Saturday mornings, so we're always a big fan of saying, like, hey, throw that in the DVR so you can catch it later. If you happen to have Armed Forces Network, we are distributed internationally, and then we're in discussion with a few other potential partners since we are part of the Disney family that hopefully it will be coming to a streamer near you sometime very soon.
All right, let's get down the journalism lane here because I want to leave the Terps alone and like all that. And obviously the job you did and how much the world has changed for journalism, for access. I'll leave the Diana Rossini stories alone, and obviously the 60 Minutes and Donald Trump, and but. And I see all of what Mark Hyman does at the University of Maryland, who was one of my first big brothers and mentors at the News American when I had my first journalism job in 1984. So I've been at this 42 years now, and I've seen it change. I've been thrown out of the media with the Ravens by Chad Steele. Obviously, the Orioles and Peter Angelos, like Jason La Canfora can't ask questions here anymore. We're in a different era where there's access and pay, and how all of these entities have changed, the NIL and college sports, but journalism as a practice, as I knew it back in the day, and the Washington Post, and I had Dave Sheinin, my buddy, on the other day from the Post, and has George Solomon, saw it back in the day when you and I were trying to get gigs. I don't recognize this and I don't know where it's going, but it feels like it's going in the wrong direction. And if I did have a grandson or a granddaughter that was 15, 16, 17 saying, hey, I want to be like you, or I want to be like Bonnie, or even if I want to be like Jim Nance, or I want to be in this industry in whatever way, I would say this is a really slippery place to be right now, to be working in sports media specifically, but the media in general.
It's interesting. I saw an interview with Katie Couric several years ago, and she said something that was so profound and it stuck with me. And I share the story pretty frequently. The moderator for the panel had asked Katie, what is different about media now versus when you first started out? And she said, today, people aren't looking for information, they're looking for affirmation. They want to hear whatever voice is coming through to them to say, you're right in the way you're thinking, which is completely antithetical to the way that I've been raised as a journalist. One of the core tenets of journalism is, first and foremost, as a journalist, and let's keep in mind that there's a difference between being a reporter and doing an opinion column or doing an editorial column where that is your job to express your opinion. A reporter is charged with gathering information, whatever the topic is, gathering the information from as many different sources and angles as possible. So what you are putting out there is a well-rounded piece. And by providing that information to the reader or the listener or who's watching, whatever form of consumer you are empowering the consumer to absorb that information and then figure out, based on everything that you've shared, how they feel about it. And no matter what is going on in the world of journalism or the world in general, I can only control the lane that I swim in. And so no matter what's going on, I've really just tried to stay true to that. If there is, as a consumer, if there's a big story going on, I am seeing how it's presented on Fox. I'm seeing how it's presented on MS, well, it used to be MSNBC, but MS Now. I'm looking at very different outlets. And then I just try to find the pieces of information that I see are consistent. And it's my approach to consuming news and how I allow it to influence my life is something I'd recommend to everybody because we all grow up with our independent experiences and they influence the lens through which we look at life and everything going on around us. But if we just come to whatever topic of conversation with an open mind, thinking, okay, something I might hear might reaffirm the way I feel about it, but maybe there's something new that can help shift my perspective. Um, I don't know, Nessa. I think we would all be a little bit better off if we could try to be open-minded and, of course, respectful when people don't share the same opinions that we do.
Well, there's also media literacy, and there's also people like, and I always go back on this. I've been doing this 35 years. I'm in it on social media in the soup with everybody else. Say, point out the time I ever lied to you. Go ahead, find it, because I don't bullshit my audience, and they know that 35 years in, and that's what kind of keeps them here. I think there's some level of trust that has to be had with everyone, whether it's your rock star, the brand that you buy your fast food for, whatever it is. We all sort of stand for something here, I think, in the modern era. And Fox stands for one thing, and Rachel Maddow stands for another thing. And we all have these silos we get into, but journalism wasn't that. Journalism was who, what, where, when. Oh, and prove it to me, and prove it to me, because it's got my
There's
name on it
also
in the byline.
there's what one of my biggest concerns is how social media has influenced the way journalists go about doing their work. Because we used to get assigned, you're a beat reporter, you have a story to do, and you've got a deadline, and it is your job to meet that deadline. Now you bring social media into the mix, and there is so much of a focus on, can I be the first? Can I break the news? And sometimes process gets lost. So for me, I have never broken a story unless I have two rock solid sources. Because if you're only dealing with one source, you never know if somebody has an ulterior motive. And I've always felt more comfortable with that two source rule.
In the modern era, they could bring a receipt and AI and video, and it could all be bouja.
Well, and the AI thing, like it could all be fake too. Like and that's the other thing I worry about too. When I look through my social media feeds, I find myself wondering more than ever, is this real? Is this person real? Is it I don't have time to go down the rabbit hole to figure out which is which. And so it's really it's a perplexing time for me as a consumer of information because and I'm an expert in how this stuff is done
Yeah, when I get
on
duped,
both
it's
social
really a
media.
bad day. If anybody gets me and I haven't been gotten much at all, you know what I mean? Because I am at heart a journalist who's a skeptic who questions three times for is this real? I get my own two or three sources in my own head to say, and there's where I talk about trust. And I think that's part of you being Bonnie Bernstein and having done this for a long time. And there's a trust built into this that comes with having done this for a long period of time. And I think that that's why people are going to watch your show. You know what I mean? I think that's why people listen to this show. There is trust built in that's going to be necessary moving forward, I think.
I mean, I think if there was anything that I could respectfully request of anybody who is consuming information is if you can try as best as you can to understand what is somebody's opinion, how they feel about something, and understanding that that is not necessarily fact. And it is really hard these days because opinion and fact are all smushed together during the course of a roundtable show, and it's hard to tell the difference. But if you can make a concerted effort to say, I know what that person is saying is his or her personal opinion, but let me go do some digging. I really think we'd be all better off. And for this show, my hope is by these women sharing their personal stories, stories that many women haven't even shared before because nobody even asks them about their sports experience, that not only athletes, but parents and coaches will be able to connect the dots in a more meaningful way than has ever been possible. One of the biggest reasons why girls drop out of sports, and while participation rates are at, record highs now, for girls, we're also dealing with a pretty alarming dropout rate, typically around their mid teens. Now, sometimes that is cost or transportation challenges, but a lot of times girls are going through their developmental stage. They feel uncomfortable with themselves, so they drop out, or they may love the sport, but they realize they're not going to be good enough to get a college scholarship. They're not going to be playing in the W. They're not going to be playing in the NWSL or the Professional Women's Hockey League or professional volleyball or lacrosse, and they move on to something else. And what we want to be able to say to athletes and parents and their coaches, because the coaches have the ability to be a really influential mouthpiece, is if you love the sport, stay and play. Why? Because the longer you stay and play, the stronger the life skills will get. And then when it's time for you to go out and find your first job, you're going to have a leg up on everybody else, and chances are you're going to be a high performer. So we are taking these real life, authentic, pure stories from some of the most successful women in the world, and putting it on a show that we hope can really change the mindset around the lifelong benefits of sports.
Nothing like playing on a team with somebody. When you played on a team with somebody 50 years later, they're still teammates. Emmy Award-winning sportscaster Bonnie Bernstein is my friend and guest. She's the creator, host, and executive producer of a new ABC series, The Champion's Edge. It premieres on May 9th. You can find all that. And also the podcast part, the actual conversation part's on The Athlete Effect, correct?
Yeah, so what we're doing is we typically sit our guests down for an hour at a time in a half-hour TV show. We don't get to get everything in there as much as we'd like. So what we are doing is we're taking the original interviews from the Champion's Edge on ABC, and then we're repurposing them for my podcast, which is called The Athlete Effect. And you can find that on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Odyssey, wherever you get your podcasts. And those allow us to go much deeper into conversation in a very meaningful way.
Bonnie Bernstein joining us here. Is this the part where I sing the Terps fight song? Maryland, we're all behind you.
You could. We're
I
never going to turn it down. Have
well, I know, I know.
you been back to campus lately?
I have not been to College Park in a while, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it is. We're really starting to invest in the athletics facilities, which is amazing. I was over at the softball complex a couple of weeks ago. We were actually shooting some stand-ups inside Xfinity, and I had the chance to go to the new basketball performance center for both our men's and women's basketball team. We are at this point, we're pretty much state of the art. In
Well, you're
most,
in the Big Ten. You better be, right?
I
I mean,
know.
that's the way it goes.
Yeah, I hear you, but sometimes you lag behind. But I really feel like there is a genuine commitment from our new athletics director, Jim Smith, to invest in facilities. So we will be up there with the Michigans and the Ohio States. We've had a little way to go, but I think we're getting
All
there.
right. On our next episode, we'll explore the NIL and we'll complain and bitch and do angry sports radio about it. Bonnie Bernstein has been my friend for going on 3 decades. She is alive and well and doing a new show now on ABC. It is called The Champion's Edge. Always good to visit with you, Bon. I'm glad you're doing well. And I managed to make this a half an hour. No Orioles, no Mets. We haven't talked about any of that stuff. It's fine.
Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it and hope everybody has a chance to check out the Champion's Edge and the Athlete Effect podcast on YouTube and wherever you get your
Hey,
podcasts.
you Jersey girls eat proper Maryland crab cakes or no? Use girls? No?
100%. Although I will say I never had blue crab. I don't think I even had crabs until I got to college. Yeah, I know.
They don't even do them right there. You're too close
I'm
to
a little bit of
DC.
a
All right, listen. Here's what we're gonna do. Once you get settled in on all this, and you're somewhere around here, you're coming out of Maryland. I'm gonna get you off the train, and I'm gonna take you for a proper crab cake. Go Coco's, Costas, Fadley's. Could do the whole tour. The Maryland Crab Cake Tour. You'd be a great guest on the Maryland Crab Cake Tour. I'd even give you a Maryland Treasure acetique horse here, or you could do Ocean City, which is better than that Wildwood place or that Atlantic City y'all had up there. Bonnie Bernstein is here. She is a Marylander by choice, I would say, in her college choices. She a Terp, as they say. We're back for more on Baltimore Positive. Stay with us.